Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I have a fairly short and really weird story about one time when I used Craigslist to find a rental. At the time I was living with my aunt and uncle, and I was working to find a new place. They weren't really pushy about me getting out of their home, but they were definitely wanting their space back. I appreciated them letting me stay, and I could take a hint, so I decided that I would go and try to find a new place. Enter Craigslist, the world of weird people selling things at a low price. I decided that I would hop onto the internet's version of Kmart and see what was available nearby. On the plus side, I didn't have much to move. I could get it all out and in within a few hours. It was really just a bed, a dresser, and a fish tank. Everything else could fit in a duffel bag. Obviously, with only that going for me, I was looking for a small place to stay, like preferably a studio or something. After searching, talking to a bunch of weirdos, and blocking a few numbers, I found what looked to be a dream come true. A fully furnished, ready-to-move studio apartment that was in a decent part of town. I contacted the owner, and after a quick chat on the phone, we had set up the time for me to move in that following Monday, so long as I could wire him the deposit money by the Friday before. At that time, it was Wednesday, so I had 2 days to get him the money. Thankfully, I had this plan for a little while, so I did have some cash set aside to get this done, and he only wanted $500 for the deposit, which was going to be a bit more than half the rent per month. After discussing it with him and sending him the money via whichever money transfer app we used, he had mentioned that the deposit would cover the first month. It was the middle of the month, so it was good with me, and that on the first month, I would owe my normal $750. I was perfectly fine with this arrangement, and Monday came around, and I showed up with my truck filled with my few items and my clothes. When I got there, he was standing outside the studio, and we chatted about the location as he gave me a quick tour. It was a nice little place, perfect for me, and it had everything that I could have wanted. I actually asked him about the furnishings, why he was renting it out with everything in it, and by everything, I mean everything. There was a TV with a console connected to it, a stereo on the side of the room, and a bookshelf loaded with popular books. He mentioned that he used to rent it as an Airbnb, which is why it was furnished, and that he was just tired of dealing with people like that, so he wanted to rent it out to an actual long-term tenant. It sounded good to me at that time, so I just thanked him and told him that I would have the rent to him on the 1st, and I signed the contract he had typed up, and that was that. Well, that wasn't actually that. In fact, it was not that at all. I lived there for a total of 3 days from Monday to Wednesday, and on Wednesday night, I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I heard someone talking out in the hallway of the apartment. I figured it was just the neighbors, until I heard the key hit the lock and the door opened. I cannot express the awkward moments that followed. The couple that walked into the apartment looked at me like I was a robber. I was looked at them like they were breaking into my apartment. And I think we all just kind of wanted to scream in terror. They asked who I was. I told them that I was the tenant. I asked who they were, and they said they were the tenants. Well, long story short, and after a lot of loud talking and confusion, we figured out what had happened. They were the real tenants, and they had been out of town for the last week. I was not actually the tenant, and was basically sold an occupied unit by someone that didn't have the rights to do so. I showed them my lease, they showed me theirs, much more official looking lease. I showed them the messages and the email and the proof that I paid someone. And, well, they lived there, so they didn't really have to show me anything. What was worse is that they didn't know the guy that I had paid, as the app that I paid with said that his name was something like Mario, and they really had no idea who he was. We ended up getting the police involved so that we could make a report for the whole situation because it was just so messed up. In the end, I apologized for eating their food and using their furniture, and we agreed that I could leave my stuff there for a couple of days so I could move back into my aunt and uncle's house. Mostly just my fish tank and my dresser, as they were heavy and hard to move. Thankfully, they were fairly polite with me, considering that I was basically an intruder in their home. And thankfully, they believed me and didn't just resort to violence or anything like that. Unfortunately, I was never able to get a hold of the landlord, or supposed landlord, to give him a piece of my mind and was out of $500. I did keep in touch with a couple that actually lived there, and they never figured out how the guy got the key to their apartment, and they had the actual owner change the locks immediately. So, that's my weird story about the time that I rented a unit that wasn't for rent. I ended up finding a place that was legit on Craigslist, and then I moved in. And thankfully, there were no more late night surprises. I know this story wasn't terribly creepy per se, but it's still scary to think that this guy had the wherewithal to coordinate this while the couple was out of town, and that he had a key to their place without their knowledge. In the end, it's just one of those weird, creepy life lessons. Sometime after getting my job at Walmart in 2008, I was looking for ways to make some extra money, so I started to list some things on Craigslist to sell. I listed my first generation iPhone for sale, and I received quite a bit of calls about it. One girl offered me a little more than I asked for if I would meet with her that day to sell it to her. Being that I was looking to make extra money, I agreed. We spoke on the phone and then agreed on a time and place to meet. Fast forward a few hours later, at about 7 p.m., we still had daylight. I went to the place she told me that she wanted to meet at, and no one was in the parking lot. We agreed to meet at a public place with lots of people, and I honestly had no idea about the area where I was. I started to feel a little off about this transaction, and it was a few cities over from where I lived. Initially, I refused, but I just kept thinking that I could really use the extra money at that point. I stupidly let her choose a place because talking to her, I got the vibe that she was a good person. I used that term as loosely as it could be, so I trusted her judgment, believing that another woman could not do anything to me. She calls me after I had waited for her for about 25 minutes and tells me that her car broke down a few blocks away, but she was still completely interested in buying my iPhone. I asked her for the directions, and I drove to meet her. By the time I made it to where she told me she was, it had gotten dark. Naturally, I felt weird about meeting her, but again, I was desperate for extra cash at this point. I sat there in my car with the windows rolled up, looking for a broken down car, and there was none in sight. I got scared and said, to hell with this, I'm leaving. And up walks this tall, skinny tan girl and a short and stocky girl. "Hey, are you Hannah?" I said. "Yes, hey BB," she says. "And yes, this is my friend Margot. Can I see the phone?" "Sure," I said. I take the phone and show it to her and tell her that it works great, and that I'm only selling it because of an emergency. But all of a sudden, someone hits me in the face, and I was disoriented for a moment and confused to what happened. Then I see both of them running away with my phone. I was pissed, to the highest level of positivity, but not because they stole the phone, but because she hit me. To give you a background about me, I am a former kickboxer, and I'm a pretty thick girl, but I take no shit, especially if you hit me. So I ran after those bitches and ended up catching the thicker girl, Margot. I grabbed her by her hair and rammed her head into my knee, and then proceeded to beat the hell out of her. The other one comes back as I am on top of Margot, and she's trying to pull me off, but being that I was kickboxing heavily at this time, I was able to keep Margot beneath me by kicking her under her arms and ribs with my knees to keep her down. The other one screams, "Get up, you bitch!" and starts to wail on me with the most weakest punches ever. Blood is literally everywhere. Margot's face was nearly unrecognizable when I was done with her. She had already dropped my phone, but I was highly pissed because she hit me. I get up off of her, and they start to run off, basically with their tails in their ass. I got my phone back along with a headache from the punch. I called the police to report what happened and found out that it was actually a rock she hit me with. A 10-pound rock to be exact. I went to the emergency room to treat my wound, but nothing has become of it to this day. After that, I ended up getting robbed at gunpoint for my iPhone on Craigslist. You would think after the first incident that I would be done with Craigslist, but hell, what can I say? I just hope that it wouldn't be as bad as the first. Well, obviously, I was wrong. I really love Craigslist. I'd estimate that I've met maybe 300 people for buying and selling stuff, and for the most part, everyone was nice and harmless. However, I did run into 2 creeps who made me rethink meeting strangers alone to sell stuff. FYI, I was an early 20s female at that time. The first guy. It was 2009, and I am staying with my parents for the Christmas holidays in a small town in Florida. I'm going through my childhood room and cleaning out the closet, and I find a giant CD holder full of maybe 100 really shitty CDs. Think Nickelback, Aqua, and etc. It's the 21st century. No one uses CDs anymore. And I figure that I'd try to sell the CDs on Craigslist, so I put up a listing. 100 CDs from the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, mix of pop and rock, all for $35 OBO. The next day, I get an email from a guy named John at around 2 p.m. He says that he's in town temporarily and that he wants the CDs. He says that he can pick them up after dinner at around 8 p.m. I email him back my address and also my number, and I tell him to text or call when he's on his way. 8 p.m. comes and goes, and I figure that I've been stood up, which happens often on Craigslist, so no big deal. My dad works for a liquor distribution company and would often do demonstration nights at restaurants and bars and would come home at bar closing time. This night, he gets home at around 3 a.m. I'm in college and a total night owl, so I'm still up probably eating junk food, surfing the web, and watching horror flicks. I hear a car pull up, and I look out the window and see him sitting in his car eating food. He often stops at Taco Bell on his way home and eats it in his car, so my mom doesn't know that he's cheating on his diet. Maybe 10 minutes later, my dad comes in and shouts my name. "There's someone here to see you. Can you please tell me why a strange man is showing up at our house at 3 a.m.? Huh? I go downstairs, and my dad says that some guy pulled up in the driveway and asked for me by name. I walk outside with my dad, and this guy, who is maybe mid-30s, gets out of his car, and he says that he's the Craigslist guy who wanted to buy my CDs. My dad goes back in the house. I tell the guy it's really late to be stopping by, especially without texting first. However, since I'm awake, I just go and grab the CDs. He then proceeds to drone on and on about why he's buying the CDs. He says that he's engaged to a woman that he loves very much, and all he wants to do is make her happy. He said that last week, someone broke into her car and stole all of her CDs. She was really upset, and he wanted to make it up to her. He looked on Craigslist and found my listing, and was really excited because I had a bunch of CDs she used to have. A weird thing is, I didn't list any of the artists or bands because I was lazy, but I didn't think about it at that time. Anyway, he said that he was getting it for her as a Christmas surprise. He said he was staying with his future in-laws somewhere nearby and that their family barbecue ran really late, which is why he never made it by 8 p.m. By this point, I've lost interest and say something along the lines of, "That's sweet, but next time you should probably call or text a Craigslister instead of just showing up." And I hand him the CDs, and he hands me cash and I go back inside. 3 days later, I start getting texts from an unknown number. Texts like, "Hey, I don't know my way around this town. Care to tour guide? I could really use a massage. Where can I get a massage in this town? You're Asian. Do you do massage? Would you take $40 for an hour massage? Happy ending?" And I respond finally with, "Who the hell is this?" And he answers, "Oh, sorry. I bought the CDs from you the other day. Do you, squirt?" I didn't respond, obviously. I showed my friends that night and we laughed it off. And then the next day I get more texts. "I still have your address. I'm at the Bank of America near your neighborhood." "I just got the $40, babe." "Only 3 minutes away. Are you home?" "You bitch. Stop ignoring me. I'm almost there." I immediately ran downstairs to tell my dad and mom. It was nighttime, so we shut off all of the lights outside and inside my house. My mom, little brother, and I went in my parents' room in the back of the house. My dad hid behind the curtains of the front bay window with a shovel in his hand. And a few minutes later, I heard him run down the front hallway, fling the front door open and run outside. We heard some faint shouting, so we all walked out of the bedroom. And by the time my dad came back in with his shovel, his face red and his hair all disheveled. Apparently, the guy came driving down our street really slow. My dad recognized the car and went running outside with a shovel, yelling obscenities at the guy. And the guy peeled off and never came back or texted me again. The second guy. I was moving from Florida to DC, and I was going to load up my car as much as I could with stuff. However, I lived on the 3rd floor plus a bit of a walk from my assigned parking spot, so I figured that I could use some help. I posted an ad on Craigslist Gigs, and I said that I was looking for someone to help me load some heavy items like TV, desk, and etc. in my car. And less than an hour's worth of work, I'd pay $45 or whatever. I give the very first responder my number and address, and he shows up. He was probably 5'8" and 350 pounds of pure fat. The sweat and smell coming off this guy in the Florida heat was pretty nauseating, but I didn't care as long as he did the job right. While he was carting heavy stuff, I was loading lighter things. Whenever I'd go upstairs to grab another load, he'd hurry after me so he could walk back up the stairs behind me. I had the door propped open, so he didn't have to worry about me needing to unlock the door for him or anything. And when he'd follow me up the stairs, he made this weird grunting noises that I assumed that it was because he was out of shape. Eventually, everything's loaded properly, save for some sweat smears on my stuff. I pay him, and then he drives off. I go back in my place to finish loading and cleaning, and I go out maybe 45 minutes later to put another load in my car. And I see his truck is back, parked across the street from mine. He's sitting in the driver's seat looking at me. When he sees me notice him, he looks away. I walk over to his window and knock. He rolls it down, and I ask if he needs any help or if he was lost. I was really confused as to why he had come back, and I knew he didn't live near me. He didn't say anything, and just rolled his window back up and then drove off. Okay, whatever. Of course, 5 minutes later, my phone starts blowing up. I don't recognize the number, so I don't answer the calls. Then the texts start rolling in. It says, "I bet you taste salty and sweet." I answered, "Who is this?" And he replies, "Your pussy. What are you up to tonight? I can come back over." I get the sinking feeling that it's the Craigslist guy. He had never called me about the job when I gave him my number, so I didn't know what his number was. He sent me another text. "I like your pink panties." Then I realized that he was looking up my dress when I was walking up the stairs, and I immediately felt like a total idiot for wearing a dress that day. He then started dialing my number over and over again. I didn't know how to do the block number thing through Sprint, so I just had to turn my phone off. Later, I was with my guy friend grabbing a bite, and I turned my phone back on. I got another text from the guy about how he wanted to toss me around like a rag doll and tie me up and make me beg for it. I show the text to my friend and tell him the story. The Craigslist creep then proceeds to start blowing up my phone again. So my friend answers and says that he's going to cut his dick off and feed it to his dog if he ever contacts me again. I moved the next day, so I never had to worry about him randomly showing up in his truck again. Since then, I've bought and sold stuff on Craigslist, but I always make people meet me at a public place. I also stalk people's email addresses, their Google Plus accounts, and etc. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.